Characters are essential to one's story. They're the beacon to guide your story to connect with them and the world their journey resides in. Without characters in your story, your creativity is simply not going to be appreciated despite how well constructed and complex you make it. Now that's just the easy part. I mean, you can simply strap a name on anyone, and however physically you present them. It can be an alien, a human, an animal. Many variations exist, but the most difficult part with the biggest dam in the river for writers is the ability to create a character that the audience can hook on. Your character must have the essential key factors, a motivation, a voice, and personality. The motivation which the audience can get behind, a motivation which makes sense for the character, a voice which a character uniquely expresses themselves, whether it's inwards or outwards, which intertwines well with their personality, which should be composed of distinctive traits and mannerisms distinguishing themselves from others. Now this entire take is simply from my own point of view and opinion. Caeser from Planet of the Apes, no, not that Planet of the Apes film starring Mark Wahlberg, but the critically acclaimed, highly praised, the current Planet of the Apes trilogy, starring Andy Serkis and the director of 2 of the 3 films, while the other directed by Rupert Wyatt. Before the whole apes become smart while the humans become sick and mute and cavemen. Rise till dawn to the end of war is a tale of the origin to the simian flu, beginning from a test from a mother whose kid ends up being one of the greatest stories told. I will be going through each film, highlighting key events in Caesar's story and how much impact it's had on his character and the beneficiary of those events. The movie opens up with apes being captured by poachers and transported as cargo, which the film transitions of Caesar's mom in a lab, whose name is, by the way, Bright Eyes. She's being tested by scientists and geneticists who've been testing these apes to find a cure to Alzheimer's. Will Rodman, a scientist, has been keeping a close eye on Bright Eyes as they've injected her with the drug. She's getting very smart, doing various tasks that Franklin has put in front of her. One day when the board wished to see this new cure, Bright Eyes is the presentation for the board member, but when they attempt to harness the ape, she becomes aggressive and attacks the scientist, and she begins to charge to the meeting where she gets shot by one of the security guards. They question her reaction and find the ape that will change the future of the entire world, which is her son, Caesar. Seeing his IQ double every year, behaving in ways a 2-year-old human cannot, solving puzzles, Caesar is seeing intelligent results from the Alzheimer's cure, while Charles, Will's father, is seeing positive results as well. Caesar lives in isolation away from the streets. Only outside area he really has climbed was the Red Forest. Years have went by, Caesar all grown up and even more intelligent than he was 5 years ago. His bond with Will has never been much more closer than ever, but the shift in his self-awareness of who he is begins here. He sees a dog on a leash which provokes the dog to bark towards Caesar, which sparks Caesar to scream at the dog. But he gets immediately yanked by his leash from Will, but this actually sparks a very important question from Caesar. Who is he? He's getting far too intelligent to realize Will isn't his father, and Will understand he can't hide the important things from him. He has no choice and brings him to the lab where they killed his mother. He learns Will adopted him as he became an orphan.
Yeah. My mother's dead. The thing is, she was given medicine.
And has been showing some very surprising results from the drug they gave Bright Eyes to cure Alzheimer's. But in the act of defense, they had to shoot Bright Eyes, who was protecting Caesar. But things seem to get even more interesting, as the antibodies in Charles seem to repel against the cure, causing incidents such as holding a fork the wrong way before Caesar had to correct him. Will states that he needs more time and resources to create the perfect drug by doing more tests on apes such as Koba. But one of the scientists seems to be getting sick, coughing up blood, as his mask was exposed to the dosage giving to Koba. But Charles's mental situation has gotten worse. As he drives his neighbor's car and crashes it, Hunziker, which is his name, becomes furious and points at Charles aggressively, which Caesar takes exception, attacks and bites that finger off. The court has ordered Will to pretty much send Caesar to an ape prison. This very caged environment is out of the environment where he grew up in. It's far more aggressive and wild, out of his own comfort zone, which is a very nice way to grow your character actually. Writing how your character will react to situations he or she is unfamiliar with, it allows for creative growth. Self-learning, which Caesar indeed tries to adjust his adoptive human nature to the ape culture. A leader of the entire pack, whose name is Rocket, bullies Caesar for wearing human clothing and throws him around like he's an anomaly to them. But wherever there is a bad apple, you're bound to find a good one. Maurice, who's intellectually gifted as Caeser, sort of comforts the poor fella. Caeser, in captive for quite some time, gets abused by the dickhead, tased, smacked verbally, but these actions become his realization of who he belongs with and wants to help, as he had the privilege of having the gifts from the drug to set his new family free, hence the character's motivation begins. Caeser, utilizing what he's learned and trained growing up, come up with a strategy to break free and head to the Forest of Freedom with the apes. Knowing the silverback is the big dog and the most brute, having him as an ally is vital, and stuck in a cage for so long, Caeser sets him free, allowing him to have a taste of not being congested in a very small space. Loyalty has been gained. So right after, Caeser has to confront Rocket and put him in his place, as he is the alpha of the entire group, asserting dominance and becoming the new leader, giving them the right to much better food. But once Caeser finds an escape passage, he grabs the vapor that made him who he is and unleashing it on the other mates, making him as smart as him. Hence the inevitable breakout, which Dickhead had zero chance of combating them with the taser and getting himself fried. Caeser leading is storming the bridge, but not to kill but to run through the blockade, except for leaving this man to Koba, who had a moment of healing as the man who abused him in the lab, he seeked his revenge. As someone who had to earn their trust, many died for the sake of the freedom he was fighting for. Once reaching the forest, he's finally found his home, and it's not with Will, but the family who accepted him despite being different. The family he freed, the family he went through back and bone, and it wasn't easy nor perfect as he's quite lost a few, but the development from being an orphan experimented on to an intelligent ape wasn't perfect for the human world as it wasn't his, to being sent to a facility where he needs to learn to adapt out of his comfort zone and earn his acceptance from his kind. Now he's home with the other apes who see him as the leader. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was directed by Matt Reeves, as Rupert Wyatt did not direct the next two sequels. The human race is being wiped out by the virus called the simian flu, with the population depleted and many people have grouped in areas for the sake of survival. Caeser has been leading his apes in peace, already having a son, but his wife, who's sick, is pregnant. He's very protective of his family. You see the rift between his son Blue Eyes and himself, as there's misunderstanding between them. Blue Eyes feels Caeser is far too hard on him, while Caeser is simply preparing Blue Eyes in case for the worst. The ape family seems to be in isolation with negative human contact since the spread began, until Ash and Blue Eyes run into a group. Carver panics and fires at Ash, wounding him, sparking Caeser to speak loudly and order the humans to leave. Caeser has far elevated himself as his image of being a noble leader to the apes. He's highly respected by his primates no matter how much they even want to disagree with his decision making. As Caeser always argues, unnecessary war with the humans will only spark death and destruction of what they've built. Any confrontation with the survivors will only result in massive casualties. They must worry about the future. He saved all the apes from cages and gave them a home in the forest. He knows the human behavior. He lived amongst them. Not all are bad, but believes some are good. But he doesn't realize there is also apes with bad intentions. Koba, the polar opposite to Caeser, abused, tested on. He's only seen the negative side of the human race, while Caeser was nurtured as he met both good and evil. But his struggle not seeing apes falling in a path to darkness and hurting their own kind ends up inciting the conflict for this film. He trusts Malcolm and his family to work near his home on the dam to restore the power to their colony. Koba questions what side is Caeser on, and how much he respects the humans too much and not seeing the dangers, but Caeser sees it differently. He sees the good and wants their work to be done so they can simply leave to avoid any confrontation or escalation. They saved his wife as the mom healed her from her sickness. He feels the need to owe them and help them, even when instances they disobeyed his orders and brought harm to their son, which is an incident Koba brought up, and questioned if Caeser even loves his own sons. Beating Koba to a pulp, we saw a moment of aggression of Caeser, who's even seen as this noble leader who wouldn't even want to harm his own kind. Even the best have a breaking point at times, but he's able to contain his feelings of such resent for such comments. Unfortunately, this moment was the last straw for Koba. and hatches a plan to kill Caesar and lead an ape revolution towards the humans. But this revolution is for revenge, not for the security for the apes. As a moment when you realize what his motive has become, when knocking one of the apes off the horses and charges alone with the spray and pray mentality. As everybody else looks on as they see the pit of rage and Koba finally unleashing on all the humans. He even kills Rocket's son for not wanting to kill a human, as Caesar never wanted this. Shows a leadership style, one wanting his own pride and revenge in the sake of killing to survive, while Caesar is focused on building and trusting to grow his ape family. Caesar, wounded and found by the humans, is brought to the place where he was raised. When he meets his eldest son, he realizes his mistake for trusting Koba. Despite many instances of Koba wanting to attack and kill the humans for the sake of revenge, realizing how much like they are.
Chose to trust.
It's a nice self-realization that even himself was so blinding to seeing apes all perfect. Koba and his key followers raiding the human colony, prisoning them like how they prisoned Koba. Once healed, Caesar confronts Koba, trying to talk him down, saying his entire motive will only lead to war and more death, and mocks Koba to using a gun, which he drops and launches himself at Caesar. The two duke it out for the leadership of the ape family. Koba, enraged, fires back at Caesar's followers, killing his own kind, which angers Caesar as Koba has crossed the line. Hanging like it was a role reversed from Lion King, Caesar takes a quick look at the damage Koba has done. A very nice parallel to Rise when he killed the egotistical businessman who was selfish for his own motive, just like Koba. But the damage has already been done, and for Caesar, he must protect and fight for his people for the war that is about to come. War for the planet of the apes, the battle between the apes and humans has begun. Troopers scurrying the forest with the help of those who fear Caesar for following Koba. They launch an attack and hope to find Caesar's main base, but the ape family are able to repel such an attack and capture the survivors as prisoners. Who's now been fully talkative, less sign language. They seem surprised as the drug has seemed to fully make Caesar into a human more than ape. He warns them to leave their home alone, as the ape who started this war is dead. He wants no harm on either side, but given the nature of the plague that was created, the Colonel seems to not care and is fighting to survive. A very important conversation highlighting how much regret Caesar carries for not realizing the hate Koba carried and that all apes are good and further from the human nature. But because of this perception, he allowed Koba to create a war between humans and them, killing many of his kind in the process. Blue Eyes and Rocket arrive from their long journey as they found a place far from the woods, which would separate them from the humans, far away from any trouble or war. Winter argues they should leave now, but Caesar believes they need time to plan as one to get safely out of the woods, but this very night is where things escalate for the worst. The Colonel and his unit infiltrate Caesar's home, killing his eldest son and his wife. The angered ape launches himself towards the Colonel in hopes to take him down, but the Colonel cuts the rope, sending Caesar far down to the waters. You see, out of fear, Winter told Donkey of their base, hence why he escaped fear with those soldiers. But an angered Caesar, blinded in rage, tells his family to leave without him as he's looking to find the Colonel and confront him. Rocket, Maurice, and Luca join him as means of making sure Caesar comes back. This is definitely a new take on Caesar, obviously filled with anger and hate. He takes no remorse nor questions. That even Rocket, Maurice, and Luca seem very worried of him. They bring along a girl who's been affected by the virus that's been mutated into making her mute. Maurice wants to take her along as she's all alone since they're responsible for killing her caretaker. That he feels obligated to take her. The three go on a long journey, seeing the effects of the virus humans who carried have mutated, making them dumb while apes get smart. But an attack leaves Luca dead, and Caesar is in a fit of emotion and anger, leaves to keep them safe and confront the Colonel alone, but a horrifying image of his family hanged barely alive, knocked out as he's treated like absolute shit and regrets leaving his family alone. Donkey and him converse on many occasions, Caesar trying to knock some sense into him that he's simply a slave and expendable. They'll throw him into the streets when the war is over. Caesar will not stand his family being treated to such manner, and when he confronts the Colonel, he learns what's his motive. The Colonel seems to have gone rogue, believing the disease can't be fixed and they need to survive, thus killing killing those infected, while the other side believes they can medically help and save the human race without killing the ones who are impacted by the virus. And even goes far to mock Caesar for being too emotional, not seeing the work he is doing from his perspective, but all Caesar can see is the man who isn't affected by sickness but is very sick with his thinking. Caesar, only seeing red, has visions of Koba, seeing himself in a mirror in a way. The moment the colonel shot his family, he saw only revenge and blood, similar to Koba, what he saw with humans as they abused and cut him in their lab. When the other side attacks the base, as Maurice and Rocket and Batty help the apes escape the prison they're in, Caesar's lust to see the colonel and kill him, he lifts that gun, but he sees that the colonel has been impacted from the virus, which was carried by the doll that was in Caesar's cage. Caesar hesitant, but immediately drops the gun and gives it to the colonel. Despite all that anger in him, he feels a sense of sympathy. He doesn't possess a cruel nature. He isn't Koba to take a dark path when the fire was lit in the forest, but he simply gives the colonel a choice. Does he want to live as a primitive being or kill himself, still siding with his ideals? Caesar, seeing his apes dying from the crossfire, uses every energy that he's left to make sure they receive no harm. But the man he spared fires his crossbow. Donkey, contemplating what he should do, takes the grenade launcher and fires it at the soldier, sacrificing himself to do the right thing and saving Caesar and his people in time, and enough energy to blow the bridge that they were slaved into building. The chain reaction causes an avalanche, but the apes are safely up the trees as they can finally journey to their new home. A wounded Caesar, whose injuries have catched up to him, talks with Maurice that the ape family is strong with or without him.
You are all home. Apes are strong with or without me.
Maurice speaking an actual full sentence that his son and everyone will know what Caesar did for them. A proud leader looking beyond, as his entire mission was to keep the ape family safe and peace away from harm is complete. And slowly he falls as the loss of blood and all his injuries were far too severe for him. He descends as his story has come to an end. Now, both John Wick and Caesar have two things in common. Their whole journey, which takes place over each film, for the same goal, which is freedom. One for himself while the other is for the freedom of his people. One will kill while the other will use peace as the first resort. Both have made mistakes and cost the lives of their loved ones for their decision making at the time, but it never brought the worst out of them. Just as simply a different direction to achieve what they need. Now, the three keys to a great character I listed earlier, which were motivation, a voice, and personality. Caesar's motivation was always the quest for freedom and peace for his kind away from the cages. His voice, which expresses himself in a more mature light compared to the other except for Maurice. His voice, which expresses himself in a more mature light compared to the other apes except for Maurice, but his voice was his strength as many followed him no matter what. Because his voice was a sign of respect for the apes and his personality of being noble and a humble leader. But you never want to make it too easy for your character, as you want something to root for. Why should you care for Caesar? His motivation may seem easy when on paper, but it comes with the struggle from the other side. Humans want to kill the apes while apes within want to eradicate the humans for survival. His perception early on in Dawn that apes aren't like humans immediately shoots him and wounds this very perception, as apes can carry the same very darkness within themselves. Like Koba, it's why he wasn't in shock nor in disbelief when he saw several apes side with the wrong side and betray him, as the notion no longer exists, but his anger for those who killed this family. He killed that ape that ratted his base, but he doesn't seem shocked for killing one of his own, as Koba was the one that broke the camel's back. But unlike Koba, who wasn't even hesitant and had no remorse, Caesar viewed himself as Koba in war with the lust for revenge he carried when facing the weak and vulnerable colonel. He was able to let go, as realizing it would only hurt him and who he is more than healing him, giving that option for the colonel to choose his own fate. Now, despite the hurdles and betrayals he faced, the sign of seeing them happy and playful and at peace after so long of fighting, that relief of letting go, he no longer has the energy to keep going on, but the satisfaction of completing his life goal of bringing peace and a home to his ape family. If you wanted to know my favorite trilogy, my favorite movie, and my favorite written character, If you wanted to know my favorite trilogy, my favorite movie, and my favorite written character, Caesar showcased what it meant to be a great leader, standing up to the wrong, challenging those who oppress and cruelty. He's no perfect, as that would be very boring, but certain hurdles and mistakes allows for room for growth and realization to better himself as a wise ape leader.